Join me, Jonesy, for interviews, recaps and much more. So tune in, unwind and get your sporting fix. So sitting alongside me on the other side of the table is a two-time Olympian, high jumper, represented Australia in many different formats in the high jumping section of sport. So it's Joel Baden. He's a local boy. And you're in the studio for the first time with a new look. There's no couch now. There's a table with these microphones. So how are you, mate?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Noah.
Thank you. Well, we were chatting before the podcast about, your whole story pretty much, and I want to put that into the podcast today. But I first want to begin with your start and how you initially got into high jumping and how'd you actually, initially start the sport?
Yeah, so I got into high jumping through watching my older brother do athletics when I was younger. So I would watch him back at Landy Field and in Melbourne do his competitions, and I think that was my introduction into the sport. So naturally when I got into little athletics and kind of progressed up the ages, I just was doing the high jump and just kind of naturally was pretty good at it. Yeah. So I just continued with that and managed to break quite a few records early on, just in, I think it was the Bellarine Peninsula Club. And yeah, that just continued. I loved the sport and I think it kind of formed a little bit of an identity around it. So that was kind of the beginnings for me.
So how old were you when you actually started, roughly?
The very beginning, like on trackers, I would have been pretty small. I don't know if I would have been 4 or 5 years old. I forget when it starts now. Yeah. But the high jump, I remember when I was jumping 115 or 1.20 m. So that would have been very early on. And then
at a young age, really young age.
Yeah, quite a young age. Obviously I wasn't getting any coaching or anything then, but yeah, that's when I started.
But
that's when I first had my exposure.
That is natural talent if you're jumping that high at a young age. 120, that's pretty impressive.
I think people have jumped higher now, but I think...
But at the time... Yeah. Like if you were that young, jumping 120, yeah. Obviously now you're jumping well and truly beyond 2 meters. But your first experiences with high jumping, whether that be in school or little athletics, were you just constantly dominating, or were there other competitors that were pretty close to your standards that you actually had some competition?
Yeah, early on, especially in my age groups in little athletics, I was winning the events pretty clearly from the beginning. And I think that just the gap kind of widened as I got older each year. I was horrible at long distance and at the other events. And apart from the field events, like I did very well in the long jump and the triple. I always thought they were awesome, and I still do to this day, although I'll stay away from triple or the more injury-prone kind of events. But I just continued to get better, and I was winning it, and definitely always at the end of the event.
So why did you choose high jump over long jump? Was there a reason for that?
I was just better.
You were just, so it was just talent, really? Yeah.
I think I enjoyed it more. I still... all the way up until year 12 was doing long jump. I might have done a little bit of triple, but I just had better technique and was just more practiced in high jump. So it's a little bit ironic because now that, all these years later, now that I'm 28, I've had like a few dreams of getting back into the long jump in some sense. So I might have a little bit of fun in some of these low level kind of competitions coming up in the next couple months. But I've always loved the field events, but high jump, early on, that was just my thing. Yeah,
and you were always winning. And when was it the point where you had a person that you actually, you were nervous, or you had competition where you think, all right, I've actually got a challenge on my hands? How old were you when the first sort of competitor came in and started to give you a reality check as to, I've got someone on my toes?
So I think my first reality check was when I first started to make the national kind of competitions. So I forget if that was in year 6 or year 7. But during that period of time, one of the other competitors, Henry Smith, he was an amazing athlete. Especially at that period of time, he dominated all of the field events: the triple, the long, the high jump, the 100 meters. He was an amazing talent. So everybody was, I think, a bit daunted by him. So he was probably the biggest challenge at that period of time.
Yeah.
But then again, I didn't do particularly well at my first couple of nationals. I don't think I even medaled, and it was something that I kind of progressed with, and that just comes naturally. Like there's more nerves going from just a local kind of competition to then states, then to nationals. But yeah, throughout the years, like obviously I've kind of surpassed that a bit more. But yeah.
Do you come from a sporty family? Is everyone in your family sporty or?
Yeah, relatively sporty. My oldest brother, he was involved in athletics, as I mentioned. He also was, just a pretty outdoorsy kind of guy. Loved fishing, and was very much into parkour, and all that type of stuff. My other brothers were involved in football, basketball. My younger brother, he was pretty similar. He tried out a bunch of different kind of sports, but mainly into longboarding.
Wow.
So there's quite
that is pretty diverse. Did you play any sports other than high jumping? Like, was there basketball or footy involved with your life as a child?
Yep. Kind of grew up playing a bit of backyard cricket, and a little bit of football, but I never did any of those competitively. No offense to both of them, but I just thought they were too boring.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
High jump was, I think it's just the coolest event.
Yeah.
By far.
I feel like it gets a lot of attention. I know at school, obviously I'm not a professional high jumper, but at school, I remember, especially in the younger years, so from year 5 to year 9, there was a lot of hype around it because, there'd be the top 3 or the top 4 high jumpers that are obviously trying to get the ribbons that you get at school, and you got people at the top, clapping as you run in, and there's a lot of theatre involved with high jumping.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's unique, especially in athletics, because you have, I guess pole vault is kind of close, but you have 3 attempts at each height, and obviously the stakes get raised.
The pressure
gets raised as you go up, and even though it's a very explosive type of event, it's also like an endurance event too. Some of the competitions can carry on for a couple of hours, and so it's very much, you have to take into account your mental state, hydration, keeping your energy levels low. There's a lot of tactics that are kind of used, and obviously they're not really employed at lower levels, like probably in little athletics. You don't consider that, but certainly at nationals and then beyond, you have to really pace yourself, and you learn those strategies over time. And
I think it's so fascinating to watch because you just float. Like the high jumpers, you just float, and it's like you're in the air for so long. And I just find it a really fascinating sport as to how a human can actually jump that high. How tall are you?
I'm 6'3".
Right, so that's probably 180 odd centimeters.
I'm 191.
Well, 191. There you go. But you're
incredibly
jumping
precise.
Yeah, you're jumping 40 centimeters taller than your actual height.
Yep.
I just can't fathom how that's even possible, to be honest. But were there any influences or like mentors that you had growing up, or any role models that you looked up to as to, I want to be like them when you're older, whether that be high jumping or not even sport related?
Yeah, I never had like an idol or someone that I really looked up to with high jump particularly. Like growing up, I would watch the Olympics. I would see, the winners of the high jump, or I just kind of watch people in general. There were some athletes that I do have memories of pretty early. So there was, I think, a Polish jumper, Arthur Partika, and he just did these monster jumps like over 237 and made it look easy, like nothing. He also had the Australian record holder before Brandon also equaled it.
Yep.
Tim Forsyth. So I think I was watching a bit of him too. But yeah, no, I never really looked up to somebody apart from my beginnings, and which was my main influence was my older brother. That's where I thought it was just really cool.
Yeah.
So apart from that, yeah, not so much. But the person who really cultivated, I've had a few people who've kind of cultivated that and mentored me and kind of led me into it to kind of make me what I am today. And I had multiple people, like from Landy Field, I had Richard Lavish, who kind of helped kickstart the high jump. Anula, who's one of the sprints coaches there. So that's how I initially kind of got my training base.
Well, she was a long jumper for Sri Lanka, and wasn't she? Was she a long jumper?
I'm not too sure.
I know. I'm pretty confident she represented Sri Lanka in the long jump for the Olympics. So yeah, she's certainly a presence locally.
She's been around forever, and she's I think all of those kind of coaches, they've played a massive part in me getting here. And obviously Sandro Baceto too.
Current coach?
Yeah, current coach. I've been with him now for 10 years. So it's a long time. But he initially was the one who kind of spotted me at, I think, my first or second national competitions, and was like, yeah, I want to coach him, and made many things possible for me to kind of get where I am today.
So he found you, found you.
Yeah,
right.
I didn't even know him.
Right. So were you looking for a coach at the time?
No. I was, I think I was just getting some basic kind of coaching at Landy Field. And yeah, I had not met him before. I was kind of spotted as part of like a target kind of talent program. And I went to, I think, my first high jump camp in Melbourne when I was in year 9. I'm trying to remember what year that was, maybe 2010, 2011. And then he took me under his wing, and he also coached the former record holder, Tim Forsyth. So I was extremely
he's got
lucky.
experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. How high were you jumping when he found you, roughly, if you remember? Yeah,
so I think around that time when I was in year 9, I had just come back from Europe. I was also kind of picked as part of this little kind of athletics European tour with another big figure in athletics, Neville Silito, from Caulfield. And yeah, we did a little bit of a tour around Europe, and we're competing around that. And he also played an early part in kind of, helping with my self-belief and helping push me to the next level. And I think when I was over there, I still wasn't training particularly hard or anything like that, but I think I jumped 203 meters. And it was around that time, around nationals, when all of this kind of culminated and Sandro came into the picture.
So at the time when he found you, were you even looking for high jump to be your career? Like, when was the actual moment where you wanted high jump? Right, I'm going to focus on this as a career.
I never even conceived of it as a career at all. It was just a sport. It's just something that I really loved. And I think for me, it only really became real at about in 2014. I had, even before then, when I was in year 10 and year 11, I had made junior world championships, junior world youth teams. I still didn't even think of it as a career. It was just like, oh, cool, I've made this next level. And it was only after my performance at the APS school sports in 2014 that it really kind of cemented me in senior athletics at the world stage. So
were you set with when your coach came up to you and said, right, I want to work with you? Were you like, absolutely, or were you a bit hesitant? Was it a tough decision to say, right, I want high jumping to be my career? Or were you like, yep? I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, it was one of those really interesting times in my life where I was at school, and for whatever reason, there was kind of like this feeling like where I knew there was something that needed to happen, or that I was just ready for a change. And sure enough, it was organized through my coach that I would get a scholarship. I ended up getting a scholarship at Melbourne Grammar College.
Yep.
So I ended up going there for my high jump, and I was in a position there to train with Sandro pretty much every day.
Right.
Which was a very unique experience. So because of that, that just kind of kick-started me.
And that would have been highly beneficial for him to be there frequently to help you. So that was...
Yeah.
Well, did you enjoy the grammar, the scholarship?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yep.
And going back to that last question, I was completely primed for a change and to do something specific, and it was definitely like my purpose to go up there. I left family and friends behind as well. So, but yeah, I was completely ready and kind of psyched to do something different, and I kind of thrived in that environment. I thrived in the structure of the school, had a wonderful education there, and I got the best high jump coaching I probably could have asked for, and that resulted in easily my best performances over the next 3 years. So,
well, you were touching briefly on how high jump it can have a long duration of hours on ends. So I was thinking about how you have your water and all that, but like I want to talk about like your training and your preparation of your high jumping. It's like, what is a typical day of an Olympian high jumper for you, Joel? What?
Yeah, so a training week typically, like through the season, can be split up in terms of your running, like plyometric sessions, weight sessions, and technical sessions as well. So it would depend on what day. So one day it might just be kind of getting a bit of an endurance up, or just doing some running that kind of emulates what you do in your run up. So it might be going around the curve.
Yes.
And then another day there's a lot of plyometric work. So there'll be bounding, might be hops, or it might just be certain kind of takeoff drills that we do around the bar. This is simplifying it, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And then another day might look like weights. So typically with all these sessions, it might be, up to about two hours, I think.
Really?
Generally in a day.
Per day? Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes shorter, but up to about 2 hours. So weights as well. We'd kind of, obviously we're going for just really we're trying to just cultivate like explosiveness and power without putting on any muscle mass, like without putting on any muscle or because hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Because
the more weight, the more you got to get up. So makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So you want to keep as light as possible. So it'd be heavy weights, and then technical sessions. I do those twice a week, which will involve actual jumps, and you have to space them across the week because you can't jump every single day.
Yeah, because it's fatiguing.
Yeah, it's fatiguing, and it's in the name, but your body and for your ligaments, you have to have a bit of a strength base to kind of offset the stresses that you're putting through your body.
Yeah,
so,
especially am I right in saying the knee is
100%.
Having a lot, like the main impact? Is the knee the main, right?
Yeah, so your knee, your ankles, you have to be really strong in those areas. But I have patellar tendonitis, which I've had for years, which makes sense. You're putting huge amounts of force through your takeoff leg on a takeoff. And if you don't have enough strength, then that's going to get to it, and you get these conditions. So it's pretty common.
So what does that do to your knee? What is that?
Just the tendon literally will start to break down a bit.
Right. And how do you manage that?
Yeah, so it's just a strength training. I pretty much do constant rehab or prehab. So that's usually leg presses, a bunch of different exercises with heavy weight that kind of helps stimulate that area and make it strong. So I do that all the time, and that's kind of how we kind of offset those kind of injuries.
Yeah.
Aside from that, ankles as well. You're putting a tremendous amount of force on a strange angle, which is completely unnatural with high jump.
Yes.
So, ankle strength as well is a massive one.
Because I guess it's pretty repetitive because you're doing like the bend and then the big takeoff. That is a lot of strain.
Yeah.
Especially been doing it for years and years. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it is a strenuous sport. The mental game obviously is plays a huge role. I've had your guests on and they always say the same. For you, would you prioritise that, or is it pretty balanced with the physical? Like, what do you value from your mental game when you're high jumping?
Yeah, the mental aspect is something, especially at these big events, you have to really be on top of your game with it. I've learnt a lot probably in the last 2 years in that regard about, keeping healthy in that regards. And I've started working with sports psychologists like in the last year because, there's a lot of mental fatigue that can happen throughout a year. Like you don't always have the smoothest run, and it can just be tough. Like training is hard. So to kind of keep up that passion for the sport, and there's a whole bunch of different factors. There's lifestyle factors that contribute to it. There's the event itself, and then when you're competing on the day, you have to kind of practice mindfulness. You have to kind of practice sticking to your cues. And it is probably one of the most difficult aspects of the sport. Like everybody can do the same training and anybody could be capable of jumping or competing or performing far better than what they're physically capable of. And it really is the mental aspect that gets most people. And it's something that I've had to learn because I haven't had the most consistent high performances at most of my world championships or major kind of debuts. A lot of those have happened in a local kind of scene. So it really does take a lot of effort, and it is really something that you have to prioritize. And some people kind of cope with that better. But yeah,
you could not have put that better. Actually, that's interesting, especially does the crowd get to you, the atmosphere? So if we look at the Olympics, whether that be Rio or Paris, or not even the Olympics, any competition you've done with a high attendance and a crowd, does that get to you? Because they're focusing on the high jump, whether they clap in or whatever, the noise, do you have to block that out?
I think I'm pretty good at blocking out the crowd and noise. A lot of the time, I think early on in like 2015 World Championships, 2016 Olympics, like you're a bit bamboozled by it all. It's a lot.
Well,
the lights, the sounds, and the crowd is like, it's a completely new experience. So I think for those, that was completely new. Since then, I'm pretty adapted to it. That doesn't bother me. A lot of the time, the mental game kind of comes in with, I think it's just the pressure and environment of, the other competitors, and I think a lot of the times too, you have to. The hardest thing to do is just to recreate what you do in training on the day.
Right. Yes.
And you try in training to go through the exact same cues, the exact same thought processes, and then you try to apply them on the day as well. But then it's also different. A lot of my good performances have been in the context of kind of coming out of nowhere, and having very low expectations and coming into it with a massive sense of like, oh, this is going to be fun and potential. And generally that's a completely different environment in the lead up to a major championships like the Olympics, like where you've spent the entire year focusing and building towards that specific goal, that specific day. I've been overseas multiple times this year for different competitions, and there's just inherently a different context in the build up to it. So once again, it just kind of goes to show that you do really have to create a good strategy for keeping yourself healthy and trying to do all of that whilst looking forward to the event and trying to peak early. It really is a bit of an art and a science at the same time. So,
yeah, like you were talking about the other competitors and how, you don't really let them get to you. I was watching, I don't know if you've seen it, but the Sprint documentary on Netflix, you might have heard of it or not, but the sprinters obviously have a lot of ego. They're up themselves, whether that's, to intimidate. Is it the same with field, with high jumpers, or is it more pretty self-control kind of?
Yeah.
Up and about.
I think it's a little bit different. I think the sprints, I think it's kind of a bit inherent in that sport that you kind of get. It's a bit more ego driven,
isn't it?
Than some of the other sports. It gets the most spotlight.
It does.
You have the most fans, and it's probably the most marketable event. For the high jump, you do get personalities, but there's definitely a more varied kind of mix of people. You definitely have your more reserved types. Yeah. I'd probably be amongst them.
You're reserved?
Certainly a bit more so. Tamberi, like the Italian, he very much is very, puts his heart on his sleeve and is a bit dramatic, but, you need those people to kind of bring light to the sport, which he does.
And to bring attention you're right.
But generally, it hasn't been my experience that there's been these kind of crazy rivalries within the high jump, or, trying to, gain an advantage over your opponent, like in a kind of nasty sense. I think a lot of the high jumpers are pretty friendly with each other on the whole, and I don't think that type of competitiveness is quite there. Like there is a little bit, like obviously this year with the high jump with Hamish Kerr and the American, like they're battling it out for gold and silver.
That's true,
but they would still have massive respect for each other.
Yeah, because they had the opportunity to get gold medals each.
To share,
and they decided to go on. Yeah.
And I think that's fair. Like people can decide either way whether they want to share the gold if they've earned it, or whether they want to, take the risk and go for it. And I think it's completely up.
And they both agreed to that.
Yeah.
So they can do what they want.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on the 2015 the World Champs. That was. Am I right in saying that was your debut when you represented Australia, like your first time representing Australia?
Yeah.
Can you talk about like where that was and what the experience was like in a very big competition?
Yeah, so the 2015 World Championships, that was my first senior debut, which was in Beijing, and it was a really special, I think, first competition because that came off the back of a massive performance that I did in my year 12 year at Melbourne Grammar, which was the APS. So I jumped 229 in year 12 at the APS competition, and there was no expectation about that, and I jumped that, and sure enough I'd qualified for the World Championships next year. So getting there, it was pretty surreal, and I don't think I had any expectations for myself. I think we stopped at Japan for our pre-departure when we got there. I think I was just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
And at Beijing, it's a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details, but I was really young. I was, I think, 19. And it was just an opportunity to have fun and see what it was all about. And consequently, like, I didn't jump my absolute best, but I still jumped 226.
Yeah, which is
with messy technique as well.
Yeah.
So
3 centimeters off. Yeah, the 29. So
off my PB.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, is that like in high jumping? That's a big margin, 3 centimeters, or
when you start getting to those heights,
it's
like
any
increase, like it starts to feel big.
Yeah. And was that a big crowd? So from what you've been used to, I'd assume that was pretty intense in terms of.
Yeah, it was a big crowd, but it certainly wasn't the craziest one that I've ever experienced.
What would that be?
For me, strangely enough, it wasn't any of the world champs or the Olympics. It was the London Diamond League that I competed in, which might have been last year. And they were just wild. The crowd was just wild. It was roaring. It was like deafening. It was it was insane.
Yeah.
So that was easily the craziest crowd I've ever experienced.
Wow.
Yeah.
So who were you in the 2015 World Champs? Who were you actually up against? Are there Olympians that you versed then that are still competing now?
It was so long ago, but there would have had to be Barshim, Tamberi, I would imagine. Yeah. You would have to fact check me on some of those, but there would have probably also been some other athletes who are no longer competing. Like maybe some of the Canadians, maybe Bondarenko from Ukraine, who's not competing anymore, but he was a massive massive talent as well. Like he was jumping 240s, 243. But yeah, I think during that time it was just kind of cool being like, okay, like, you know, you're going from a national kind of setting and then you're up against these guys who are also the best in their countries. And
were there Aussies there as well, like Brendan Stark, or was he a bit later? Or
I'm pretty sure Brendan Stark was there as well. I'm pretty sure he got into the final, by memory.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was just us two. It's only really been Brandon and myself who've
been there for a long time.
Yeah, who've kind of represented Australia in the high jump in, you know, in the past kind of few years up until the last two. But, you know, there's just different personalities and within athletics, you don't make super close friends with everybody. But, you know, we definitely, I think as the years kind of go on, you kind of understand where each other's journeys a bit more. Yeah. And obviously within any sport, you know, you want to kind of hold on to your record.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess there's a bit of,
you know, you kind of want to make a place for yourself as well.
And yeah, you respect each other's, but you always want to win, and that's
100%. And it's just the natural kind of progression with athletics and any event too, that you have these peaks and these like areas where you're not doing so well, and so, you know, I think as you kind of get older and you've been in the sport for more, you kind of start to appreciate and kind of celebrate even like your rivals or other competitors' performances and be like, you know, if that was me,
you'd want to be praised.
Yeah. And it's the best feeling in the world.
For sure.
So there's a lot of respect. Like at the end of the day, he's an incredibly professional athlete and he's made so many of the finals and is able to really get those clutch moments, those third attempts, and make his way. And it's really hard. I certainly don't have that level of mental game yet in my career. So it's very, very impressive.
Yeah. Just finishing off with this training and the preparation, and I want to know like your routine for each jump, because everyone's different, and on the Olympics, you know, some have the really long strides and whatever. I'm not knowledgeable with the terminology, but it's all different. What's yours like? If you can break it down for
mine's not very complicated. I really just run. Obviously, with the high jump run up, it's a little bit more of a little bit more of a kind of a bounding
Yep.
type of run, like it's kind of stridey. But yeah, mine's not too complicated. I just have a walk-in
Yep.
approach, 2-step walk-in approach,
Yep.
and or just a standing approach, and then yeah, it's just a gradual kind of rhythm. Some people change it up quite a bit and will have a bit of a hop or a skip at the start, or they might, or like the world record holder has these massive loping kind of strides throughout his run up, and it's a completely personalized thing depending on the athlete.
I'd like to know your perspective on that, because I obviously I'm not as knowledgeable in high jump, but I would assume you'd want to be running to the bar as fast as possible. I might not be right in saying that, but I feel like if you're taking long strides, like what are the benefits of that?
It's completely personal. Fast isn't necessarily always the right thing.
Right.
You have high jump is, there's a huge amount of different ways that you can get over. Like there are certain things that you have to stay constant and the same, but you have jumpers who have very short run-ups, who are quite slow. Certain things that remain the same is that you want to have a nice acceleration in those last three strides. You need to have a bit of acceleration to hit the ground, but you'll have slow jumpers who are lopey and boundy.
Wow.
And then you'll have, going back to Brandon, he's a speed jumper. He has a massive run up.
Yep.
And he relies a lot on his speed to generate that height for him. And he generates a lot of speed, whereas I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I have a lot of just power off my takeoff, so I can jump almost my PB height off a short approach.
Wow.
And there's different ways people do it, but a lot of the time you're just trying to find something that you can replicate and repeat over and over and over. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to look at your career highlights and what stands out to you throughout your career in high jumping. What would be your most, I guess, memorable jump, whether that's your PB or memorable experience? I just want to know a bit about you in the spotlight.
So it's funny because yesterday I was coaching at the APS competition up at Lakeside. So that's the private schools competition. And that holds a very special place like in my sporting journey, because when I was, like I mentioned previously, in year 12, it was the Opens high jump that I competed in, and I broke the record. I jumped 229 when I was 18 years old, in year 12. And I had the entire crowd, I had the entire school behind me, and it was easily the most surreal experience, and one of the most meaningful ones. Like I felt like I had served my purpose really well at the school for my scholarship. I feel like I kind of showed my potential in the event and was able to be like, okay, like this is serious, and I've been able to make this standard at such a young age, to now get into the Olympics or to get into these World Championships events. So that was absolutely incredible, and that will always stand out as probably being the best performance and the most enjoyable one that I've ever done. Also because it's rare to kind of get into what I'd call like that Zen mode. Yeah. When you're up there and you have an entire crowd behind you and it's just silence and you're just completely focused and you just execute. You don't have to think about your run up. You don't have to think about any of the particulars. You just go out there and you just let it happen, and it does. And trying to replicate that in major championships, that's like the secret ingredient. It's very hard to find and to replicate. But that's what all the sports psychology and everything's about. But apart from that, 2015. Actually, no. I'd say the first Olympics. Obviously, I didn't compete well in that, but I made it at 20 years old.
To make it, it doesn't.
That was my childhood dream. I remember having the Rio Olympics, a little cutout picture that I had on my corkboard. So to make that was really, really cool.
Absolutely.
That was super special. And, you know, once you're an Olympian, you're always an Olympian.
Exactly.
And then since then, probably one of the best major championships that I've competed in, like performance-wise, was the 2022 Oregon Championships, which was also funny because it came off the back of injury and just last minute heading over there and seeing how I'd go. And it's good for reflection sometimes because, once again, I had no expectations and I really enjoyed it. I didn't care if I went out early, and I jumped 2:28 in the qualifier to make the final and jumped 2:28 again 2 days later in the final as well. So I think I came 10th, that's the best performance that I've done over there. So
you would have been happy, obviously, with that. Stoked.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously you're an Olympian, so you cannot not talk about the Olympics now. I want to talk about your whole experience. Firstly, Rio, because you needed to jump 2:29 to qualify.
Yep.
And you did that in Cairns.
I did.
In June.
Yep.
Can you talk about that? So you needing to jump that, and then we'll go to the Olympics. So you in Cairns in June.
2016.
Yep.
So I have to kind of go back in time. Was
there pressure?
There was pressure. I was chasing the qualifier. So right there, you have a qualifying window to get into the Olympics, and that runs, I think, all the way up to about a month before. Before it starts. So we were chasing the qualifier for that. I had done a bunch of competitions, and I think my last chance was in Cairns. So I was staying up there for a bit of a training camp with some other athletes, like a former Australian high jumper, Nick Boyich, Henry Frayne, the long jumper as well. And we had a bit of a camp there, and eventually that kind of led to a competition. And I remember the night before, I was just imagining myself kind of getting over that qualifying bar. And then on the day, I just executed it. I don't really remember if I was super excited. I know I was stoked after I jumped it, but I can't remember too much about that day. But cleared 2:29, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then it was literally a couple of days later that I flew out to go to the Olympics. I was just like, I made it. I'm off.
So, wow. So we'll talk about Rio. So you're on the plane to Brazil. Did you have any expectations as to what the Olympics would look like, whether it's your performance, how you'd go, or even the village? Like, what were you thinking on the plane? Were you nervous and excited?
Oh, I was super excited for it. And probably nervous excitement. I enjoyed the whole experience with the team.
For sure.
I think I got a little bit carried away. I was still pretty inexperienced with some of those competitions, and you get to an Olympic village, and in Rio, they had their own McDonald's that you could just go to, and you could order.
For the Olympians?
Yeah, you could order as much as you wanted.
Oh, wow. Did you get a bit carried away?
Only afterwards. I was pretty self-controlled.
Yeah,
but
well, that's good.
I think the Achilles heel of my performance then was there were a bunch of table tennis tables all throughout the village. So I was just playing hours of table tennis, probably fatiguing myself.
Yeah, really ideal.
And because I love table tennis. So I think I played probably a bit too much of that. And also, in addition to, because I was chasing the qualifier, my preparation wasn't super ideal that year. And it was a little bit of a weird one, the performance for Rio, because I think I was still learning about, training loads and what I needed to do for my body. And we were still kind of consolidating that, me and Sandro. Yeah. And we hadn't quite got it right. And I had a bunch of these like aches and pains, and who knows if it was just because I wasn't in a similar routine or if I had changed a bunch of things. But I remember warming up. It was at nighttime, I think, the qualifier.
Hot?
And it wasn't too hot. I think it was all right. It was just I think warm. And for whatever reason, my warm up wasn't quite right, and then I got out into the stadium, and the lights were just blaring. And I remember walking out, and I was just like kind of dazed, and I think I had a bit of a headache, and I was just like, it wasn't a great setup for the rest of the performance.
Yeah.
And usually it's kind of like that. Usually when you're going into a competition, you want to be in a good headspace.
Absolutely.
And I certainly wasn't. I certainly wasn't for the 2016 Olympics.
Well, you enjoyed. Well, it seems like you enjoyed the experience in the village with your ping pong and your table tennis and your macas. So
and all around
that's good.
The closing and opening ceremonies.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was still amazing to have made it. It's a lot of effort.
Oh man,
just getting up to that point,
isn't it? It is. Yeah. And you would have met a lot of Olympians along the way too, and you would have met people that you wouldn't have even known.
For sure.
So, and then can we compare Rio to Paris? So you were just, I don't know, a couple of months ago, you're in France competing.
Yeah.
You've obviously been to Olympics before, so you sort of, did you know kind of what you were in for and everything?
Yeah, I knew completely what I was in for this time. So, and I've done so many other championships. Yeah. So,
for sure.
Yeah, it was very different. In some ways, it was similar to Rio. In other ways, it was very different.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is years later, and I'm a more mature athlete, even obviously at the minimum age-wise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was different in regards of it was also a bit of a mixed year with some injuries, like early on. And just also busy. Like I got married in March, and that was kind of during our domestic season. So got married, had our honeymoon. So it was a bit of an interruption.
Yeah.
And we knew that was the case. We did factor that in. So it was going to always be a little bit messy. But that kind of did catch up with us. I was in China for 2 weeks for some diamond leagues, and I was jumping well, but somewhere in that period, it's hard to explain, but I just kind of lost my feel and technique, and it was quite hard to regain coming back into a Melbourne winter that was freezing. And that's another thing for high jump. Cold, wintry sessions are not your friend.
Right.
They're not your friend.
So what's the ideal? What's your ideal? If you could choose the weather tomorrow, what
25.
would be the ideal? 25.
Just 25 degrees.
25 degrees.
Just clear. Even
no
20.
Wind.
20 upwards.
Yep.
Even when it's super hot and it feels uncomfortable, your body and your muscles respond so well.
Yeah.
So, in a different world, I would be doing the exact same stuff, but I'd be living in Queensland. But
yeah. I know there was, with Paris, there was a bit of controversy with the accommodation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What was your experience? Because I was overseas, and I was chatting to there was a rowing doctor for the Olympic team, but they said they had like a palace, and I don't know why. I do not know why, but I want to know your accommodation, because I know a lot of Olympians weren't that keen on where they were staying. So what was yours?
Yep. It wasn't too bad overall.
Okay.
I've had many people ask me about the bed situation, the cardboard beds.
Cardboard beds.
All completely made out of cardboard. We did have mattresses,
that's a start.
but the Australian team, we had to bring extra mattresses to
make
it more comfortable. Yeah, so we had a mattress on top of a mattress to make it nice. So look, given that, we were pretty well prepared for it. I had my own pillow too, so that wasn't a problem. The beds were too short. They were definitely too short for a high jumper. So, legs were hanging off, and the cardboard was annoying at times, but it was strong enough. They were strong. They weren't going to collapse or fall.
Right.
But, you kind of, everybody is supposed to be in the same situation with the same condition. So you just kind of,
if you're suffering, others are too.
Yeah, you need to just suck it up. But, some other athletes, some other countries, it certainly wasn't good enough for them. So they probably would have
been fair enough to be. In that.
But overall, it wasn't too bad. It was livable. But nothing will compare to your bed at home.
Yeah, exactly. And if we compare it to Rio, that accommodation, was that a lot nicer?
What
was that like?
It's probably similar. I think we had better beds, but it was similar. Yeah, it was similar. The accommodation it's not perfect. It's a little bit rough. The one thing I will criticize the French the accommodation at the Paris Olympics was just the bathrooms. The drainage system there was just I don't know what they were thinking, but the water would just flood the entire bathroom from the showers because there wasn't any decline at all. So it was just completely flat.
Wait, is this when you have a shower or you turn the tap on? Or...
When you have a shower.
So it was just flood?
Yeah, usually you would expect there to be like a little like recess, like where the shower area is. But it was actually raised and it was completely flat. So the water would just flood that area and then go down into the bathroom area as well.
Wow.
And so it was just horrible. Like the toilet papers would be completely soaked everybody's like dirty feet. You'd have like dirty, murky water.
Wow.
That's been flooded. So
that's really ideal. That
was funny. That was funny. But,
I
don't miss it.
What is your best story? Would that be the best story in the Olympics, or even if you could, a story that you have? Because that is a pretty good one, you know.
Best story doesn't involve me, but it does involve Joel Reith, who I roomed with.
Yep.
He was also another high jumper, Australian high jumper with us. It was his first Olympics, and
in Paris.
Yeah, I remember very clearly. One of the things that they tell you when you go on your first kind of major debut is to keep things the same, because you have these massive dining halls that are just filled with food, endless food, and you can go back as many times as you want. There's soft drink like vending machines and everything. So you want to try and keep everything pretty much the same. You want to be eating similar to how you do.
You don't want to be 10 kilos.
I remember sitting down with Joel and he just comes back with a tray and it's just piled with food. Like something that you might see like in Dragon Ball Z or something like that.
And he's a high jumper as well.
He's a high jumper. And he's lean.
Wow.
But he just had this mountain of food. And I just remember looking across to the other guys and just being like, oh my gosh. I wonder if his coach knows.
Yeah, well, he wouldn't want to if he's going to be that much.
And he ate most of it as well. He's just guzzled it down. I don't think he would mind me even saying that. No, it was so funny. And, you know, he'll refine his approach.
Yeah.
In the years to come, he'll have many major championships.
That's something I'd do. I'd absolutely get stuck into the food. But it's fair enough. If it's there, you just eat it.
Especially because many high jumpers... you have to be so weight conscious.
You were saying that earlier, and Did he notice any effects or?
I don't think so. He's pretty blasé. He'd be a great. It would be great to have him on. He's one of the funniest. He's one of the funniest blokes. Ever.
Yeah, that's gold. Yeah. That is a good story.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's lots of things that you learn in the Olympics, and. Yeah, what would be the biggest thing you've learnt and stories that you've seen, if you could date back and think of one?
Yeah. For me, like, I'm not a story of... My story isn't one of crazy success in the major championships. Yep. And you do have to live and deal with... Like, at least I have... you know, these major kind of blowbacks or these poor performances. Yeah. And I think especially after this one, I think it just helped me realize that, especially in these sports where you've done it for a long time, like I've done it for almost 10 years, that you do have to give yourself like enough time to rest and recuperate. And sometimes you just need time off to, you know, get that passion back, and more than that, I think it does help you just to deal with setbacks and kind of failures, and also kind of gives you a good avenue to kind of sit down and to be honest with yourself, no matter what it is, whether it's sport, and kind of be okay, why didn't I achieve as well, and then you know, what can I put in place like concrete steps that I can actually do to make it better for next time. And yeah, like that whole process, like of just being honest in how you can improve, it's super important. And sometimes it takes, quite a few major championships or a lot of moments to eventually do that.
For sure.
So that, but also just to be grateful. Grateful for those experiences, because the Olympics happens every 4 years. The majority of the population doesn't go to an Olympics.
No.
It's a pretty special event to make, and you have a lot of influence, even though you might not realize it. Being an Olympian or making it, like, you're out there in the spotlight. It's broadcast to the whole world. So regardless if you win or if you lose, like, use it as a platform to inspire others, whether it's through success or through failure.
Yeah, you were literally like the epitome of an athlete. Like, if you make the Olympics, you are top of the top, pretty much. So whether you win or whatever, to make it is something that, as you said, no one. It's so rare to make it. So that is. Are you chasing LA 28?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm 28. I'm married. Things change. How much longer will I be in athletics? I don't know. I'm not sure. I like having, at the moment, I like having the freedom just to be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take it day by day. And
I like that.
The most important thing is that with whatever you're doing, you have the passion for it.
Exactly.
There's no passion, there's no point.
Correct. So we've been probably spending a solid hour talking about your high jumping, and I want to talk about a bit away from the sport and what you're like away from high jumping. So what are your hobbies and your passions away from the sport?
It's pretty varied, actually. It's been in the past, it's been alluded to. Even though I'm not a DJ, some people have called me DJ Bados. But,
there we go.
I'm not a DJ.
You're not
a DJ. No, clearly not. But I do. I love my music.
Yep.
Love listening to music.
Yep.
I kind of share that with my wife as well, which is awesome. But
do you play or just listen?
Play. I like to play a bit of piano, guitar, and. Yeah, I do a bit of music production as well in my spare time when I can find some time for it.
If I gave you one song to put on Spotify, what would it be right now? Put you on the spot. Or what genre?
Have I been listening to?
What genre?
It's pretty wide.
I am the same.
It's pretty wide. I like some pop, I like EDM,
Yep.
I like rock, I like some indie stuff.
Yeah.
Some metal.
Yep.
I think I've been recently listening to Zed's new album that's come out, which is a bit of a weird mix, a bit of a hybrid. And he's got like John Mayer on some of the tracks, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but
it's good.
We'll listen to a bit of that. But yeah, so a little bit of music production. What else do I get up to? Currently doing a bit of gardening.
Yes.
As I mentioned just before.
Gotta love gardening. Food out of the garden, so much better.
Yeah, I want to get some tomatoes going.
For sure.
I'm also a little bit of a nerd in some sense. Like I'm interested in philosophy, religion, theology, and that type of stuff. So I like listening to pretty obscure and reading obscure things. For sure. Relating to religion and God and stuff like that too, and faith. So that kind of keeps me occupied and spending time with my brothers. And what else?
Gets your mind off the high jumping, which is good. Good to have a bit of balance. You talked about basketball.
Yeah,
and I don't know where you were going, but before the podcast, you talked about basketball and how there's something going on there. So just give us an update of whatever you were going to say, if you remember. Stories or
So I have a history with basketball. I love it. I used to play madly in early high school, but as that was kind of intersecting with my high jump and my high jump career. It came to a bit of a breaking point, and the nexus of that was when I qualified for the World Youth Championships, which was in Ukraine actually, back in I think 2011, and we were heading off to a pre-departure camp, which is kind of like a little camp that we do before we head off to go over there. That was held in Brisbane, and we had just arrived, and we had some free time straight away. So we found a basketball court and we headed down there, and I was with two other athletes, and they kind of egged me on to go and dunk, and I was getting to that age where I could with a regular sized ring. I always say this as a disclaimer, just to say I can dunk.
Can dunk. If you jump 233,
but it was a higher ring, and sure enough, they egged me, so I went and tried to dunk, and it was higher than usual. So I hung on to the ring. My momentum pushed me forward. Then I dropped and fell back, and I broke both my wrists at the same time.
What?
And so I was in the hospital. My coach has a whole bunch of funny videos and photos of me like drugged up and with both hands in a cast. I think I was called X-Men for a while because I was in a double cast. So it's well known in the athletic circles, this event. So I missed that event. And ever since then, my coach has been pretty adamant that...
Do not dunk again.
I do not dunk. I do not play basketball.
No.
I still kind of have dunked, except I just make sure I drop the ball over the top instead of making any contact with the ring. Yeah.
Can't afford any more of those.
But I still love basketball. I'll get back into it after.
Do you follow it or just play it?
I don't follow, but I love to play.
Yeah, it's a good sport. It's
I do miss my
sport.
team sports.
Yeah. So obviously, life after high jumping. I don't know if you've had a thought about this or whatever, but you said you were coaching young kids, or coaching in that. Is that something you want to aspire to do in the future, or? Yeah,
I'll continue with the high jump coaching. It's something on the side. I'm not sure at the moment where exactly it will develop, but I've got a bunch of things alongside the high jump too. I'm currently studying cybersecurity, so I'm going to get into that. And that's kind of plans for the future, regardless of how long high jump will go on for. But I've got that kind of career to kind of look forward to. And what else? Not too sure. Just see how it goes at the moment. Yep. But getting, I think I'll have a bit of fun in the future as well. I can certainly foresee me getting back into team sports, and I don't know, doing things that I wouldn't have otherwise done because I have to kind of be a bit protected. With elite sport, injury is not your friend, like as I said before. Absolutely. It's not a bit restrictive. So it would be nice. I think being able to have that freedom to do some of those things that I couldn't. So
I think reflection is a important thing to do on a career, or even on whether you're sporty or not. But I want to focus on positives and a negative. So if you would like to look back on your career, would you change anything you've done, or would you tweak anything to improve? Obviously, regret isn't good, but it's good to acknowledge the things you've done in the past to change. Is there anything you change?
Change-wise, in retrospect, I would. There's a lot of some things are kind of out of your control to some degree, and I think especially when you're young, I think the best way somebody put it to me is that you can kind of take the sport, or you can kind of conceive it in the way like where you're taking a backseat approach to it, and somebody else is driving the car. And if you're doing that, you're not really in control of the sport. You're not really in control of what you're doing. And sometimes you're just kind of going along for the ride, but sometimes you don't really care, or you're not really being responsible. And like, I was very young when I started, and throughout my athletics journey, it's also kind of, it's for everybody, it's this process of self-development and learning to take more accountability for what you're doing.
For sure.
And I certainly wasn't as accountable as I was earlier on. And I think that kind of pressure of kind of trying to find yourself, especially in your early 20s, and forming and like trying to figure out like who you are and what you're doing and everything can be a bit disorientating. And that all bleeds into everything that you're doing, including athletics and high jump. So you do have that aspect. I think I would change. What else would I change? Yeah, if I was to go back, or if I was to give advice to myself earlier on, I'd probably want to drill that into myself a bit earlier and be like, if you want to take this seriously, like you need to get this organized and get that organized and do this. But at those times, I didn't have somebody to tell me that, so you're kind of figuring it out as you go.
So you go.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
And is that what you would teach? Obviously, the things that you would change, you'd bring to the people you're coaching as well. So I guess it sort of works.
Yeah,
like that,
you would.
Sure.
You have to, and I think as well, like regarding passion for the sport, when things become more serious and you're representing a country and you have more systems in place that you're accountable to, like you really have to try and maintain and enjoy the sport throughout it. I think it can be obvious when somebody is doing something that they're not really enjoying or not really feeling. It's reflected pretty clearly in their performances or in probably just the expression on their faces. And like take Nicola Dermott, for example, who's been doing extremely well, Australian female high jumper, and she loves the sport, she loves the mission, she loves what she's doing, and it's reflected very clearly in her performances.
It is.
And you have to make sure that I think you're enjoying the sport. I'd also say to myself as well I wish I had reflected more and maybe taken a bit more time to rest and reflect before getting straight back into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's some of the I think that kind of addresses maybe some of the regret or some of the negative parts. The positives is that I've made all of these championships so far, and yeah, like I said, regardless of the performance, all of these, it's a very unique experience to have your failures, your successes, or your failures in the spotlight, broadcast to everybody. It's very unique. It's a lot of pressure.
It is.
And you become more resilient in the process of it. And you learn how to come back from those setbacks. And you have to just keep on trying. And I think that's kind of a massive part of it. You learn that no matter how bad it is, like I've had crushing performances and crushing defeats, and to be able to still rise back up and get on your feet and be like, okay.
It's tough.
Yeah, it can be really tough. And that's just that's the nature of elite sport. Yeah. But, I've made many good friends doing it. You learn a lot about yourself. You get to travel the world. And yeah, I've been to more countries than I could imagine. I'm actually looking forward to a bit of a break from traveling so much. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's an amazing experience, and I get to be part of a very small kind of community that gets to experience any of these things. So
I just want to finish off by, asking you if there is a legacy or an impact that you want to leave behind, either as an athlete or as a person. Is there something where you want to make a change, or you want to act a certain way to make an impact for others?
Yeah, I've thought about this. I've thought about it a lot, because generally people want to make a legacy, kind of regarding their achievements and the good things, and it's very easy to kind of be like, I want people to be inspired by how good I am and how I've dominated and how I've got to the 1% of the 1%, even in the Olympics. But I think it's a more common experience for everybody to go through failures and to be able to kind of just realize that you're a human being and that everybody's going to experience it, and to not be so hard on yourself, to imagine that you can be there and say, take it easy. It's not the end of the world. And how else would I think about it? Even though you are doing something that you love, or that you're super passionate about, or that you're super skilled at, that there's a tendency to form your identity completely around that thing. And when things don't go well, and that shatters, like you feel like nothing. And the truth is that you're a person who's doing high jump or doing a podcast or doing whatever, and you're not that thing. You should be doing it as a sense of out of passion, out of enjoyment, and you're allowed to say to yourself that, for example, that I'm tired of this, or I'm kind of sick of being this thing, or I just need to get some time away from it, and I'm going to try something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you're always at liberty to change your career or what you're doing, and to step away for a time and to come back, and you're not the thing that you're doing. So I'll just say that while it's important and you can be an inspiration, is to enjoy the thing that you're doing, and to not
worry.
It's not worry so much, I think.
You could not have put that perfectly.
And even for my own performances, the best ones I've done have been when I'm not worrying, when I don't care about the result. And sure enough, that's when I seem to be able to jump these massive,
with a relaxed mind.
Jumps.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I feel like I could chat to you for hours on end, but obviously we have to wrap it up. But you've covered everything and more. You've covered everything and more. And I appreciate you so much, Joel, for jumping on and sharing your story and everything that you've done. And it is actually inspiring, and I think a lot of people that will listen to this will feel the same. Good luck for the future. We'll be certainly looking at your future and what you're going to achieve, but I'm sure it's going to be brilliant. So thank you so much, mate.
No worries.
An honour to have you on, and we'll catch up later.
Definitely. Please do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noel.
Thank you.